Good afternoon. Welcome to the Center for Culturally Responsive Practices Professional Development Series. We are grateful for your participation this afternoon and excited to engage with you in this important work. Whether you teach in the humanities, sciences, education, or support students through student support services or academic affairs, your role in shaping the experiences of all students is vital. Each interaction, inside or outside the classroom, contributes to an inclusive, supportive learning environment that helps students thrive. This year, the Center for Culturally Responsive Practices, CCRP, proudly celebrates its 10th anniversary at Eastern Oregon University. Founded in response to the growing need for sustained campus-wide professional learning around equity and culturally sustaining pedagogy, CCRP has become a cornerstone of EOU's commitment to inclusive excellence. Over the past decade, the center has supported faculty and staff across disciplines in deepening their understanding and equity-minded practices and their impact on student success. Together, we honor this legacy this afternoon and look ahead to the next chapter of growth, collaboration, and transformation. I want to recognize Tanya Lubis, the director of the Center for Culturally Responsive Practices, whose leadership, vision, and unwavering commitment to equity have guided this work from its inception. Additionally, we extend our deep appreciation to the CCRP team, Kristen Johnson, Taylor Smith, and Angela Vassencool for their dedication, creativity, and continued efforts to support inclusive, equity-driven professional development and learning across the campus. Once again, thank you so much for being here this afternoon. I normally don't come with prepared things, but being this is the 10th anniversary, I wanted to make it very, very well done. So with that, I would like to turn it over to Tanya Lubis, who is going to introduce our speakers this afternoon. Tanya.
Thank you, Rhea. All right. Hello to those that are on live stream or those that will be watching the recording later, as well as those in the room. Thank you for coming. One accolade that I wanted to mention, and he just walked in, is our program assistant, Christian Mendoza, who helps with preparing all of what we do. So we're always happy to have that support. As Rhea said, my name is Tanya Lubis. This is the 10th year of our program, which was a vision created out of actually some dissertation work I was doing at the time. And this year, our Center for Culturally Responsive Practices and these presentations are sponsored in part by a grant from the Educator Advancement Council and Oregon Department of Education. So we're very grateful for that funding. Today we have some special guests who I'll tell you about momentarily, but we're going to start with a land acknowledgement. We humbly acknowledge the first peoples of this land. Eastern Oregon University is upon the Cayuse, Umatilla, Walla Walla, and Nez Perce people. We celebrate their traditions, languages, and stories. We acknowledge their continuing connection to this land, water, and community, and pay our respects to these original stewards of Northeastern Oregon. We do recognize that land acknowledgements are not a substitute for actions in support of social justice initiatives, but rather a lifelong process toward learning more about the powerful heritage of the people, both living and in the past, whose land is being occupied in Oregon, and bearing witness to the truth of the past, present, and future impacts of white settler colonialism. With knowledge, we can face our state's history, embracing the discomfort and humility that often accompanies acknowledging historical truths, and renew our commitment to the developing educators who can help all students appreciate their roots and traditions. It's our collective responsibility to critically interrogate the past and current systems and to honor, protect, and sustain Indigenous peoples and their land. With that said, I get to introduce two friends. Some of you may recognize Kristen. This is her 5th time coming to EOU, and this is Elizabeth's 2nd time joining us here. And they gave me a quick Blackfeet language tutorial last night, so bear with me, please. First, I'd like to introduce my friend, Dr. Kristen B. French. Asanaki Skapi Pikani, Blackfeet, Ani Grovan, Eastern Band Cherokee settler. Has been a professor in early childhood, elementary, and multilingual education at Western Washington University for the last 18 years. She teaches courses in tribal sovereignty, Native education and policy development, racial justice praxis, and multicultural education. Kristen is a faculty advisor to the Native American Student Union and the Beating, Reading, Eating, and Weaving for Healing Always group. I want to be part of that group too. Her research interests include critical land-based family history, the anti-colonial teacher education, Sauk-Suiattle sa Tapi land-based learning, and Indigenous craftism. Two recent publications include Composting Settler Colonial Distortions, Cultivating Critical Land-Based Family History, and Truth, Land, and Sovereignty, Native American Intellectual Activists, their critique of settler colonialism and the unsettling of multicultural education. Kristen's the mother of two amazing children, one of which I'm going to introduce next, and Charlie. When she's out of the office, you'll find her in her healing garden, kitchen, craft room, and reading Indigenous speculative fiction. Alongside Kristen is her daughter, Elizabeth Bragg. Ma'atso ma staki, am skapi pikani, Blackfeet. Ani Grovan, Eastern Band Cherokee settler, is a worker, owner, and long-hearing farm. A multiracial rural workers co-op and certified organic farm with a commitment to growing food as if the lives of our kids and our communities matter. Located in Sauk-Suiattle, Stillaguamish, I think, and Upper Skagit lands. She holds a master's degree in law development and globalization. Her thesis focused on the complex relationship between food sovereignty movements and international human rights frameworks. Kitchen grunt, migrant youth educator, community food movement builder, school garden coordinator, and land transfer specialist are just a handful of the hats that Elizabeth has worn over her decade of organizing. Long-Hearing Farm is named after her ancestor, long-hearing women whose values of love, joy, and commitment to family and adaptability inspire her every day. She's a student of the ideas that all organizing is science fiction and archival research is time travel. And you'll find her at the farm or in the kitchen with a speculative fiction audiobook playing in her ears. That said, please join me in welcoming our special guests today who will spend the next hour or so sharing their knowledge with us.
Just so you know, it is likely that we'll both be crying at some point during this presentation. So, and partly because what we're taking you on is a journey today and looking at how to make Indigenous history accessible. Native American fiction is critical land-based family history. So we're doing this in multiple layers. We're going to share our critical land-based family history with you, which is, as you can imagine, when we start doing that critical family history work, it kind of gets in your heart. So, but we also want you to engage in the process as well. So let's see. Thanks, Elizabeth. Oh yeah, wait. Before we move.
Get your phones out.
Yeah, how often?
How often do you get that at a presentation? And then, oh yeah, you all know. The little QR code, right? That will open up the whole Mentimeter.
It will, yeah. So we're going to do some Mentimetering. Are you all familiar with Mentimeter? Okay, if you're not, it's fun. And, you know, it's a great way to engage folks. If you're feeling like you'd like to interact in an anonymous way. But it's also wonderful, you know, as an addition to some, you know, collaborative conversation. So I hope you all can talk with each other as well. Okay. So what are our hopeful outcomes for you today? So this gathering is really focused on the integration of speculative fiction and critical land-based family history to make Indigenous history accessible. And so we're going to discuss the novel Fool's Crow by James Welch, who is my cousin, Elizabeth's cousin. We're going to be emphasizing its role in the Native American literary renaissance. James Welch passed in 2003. He was only 62. He had several novels that are considered he was part of the Native American renaissance of fiction writers who was able to really be the shoulders that our current Native writers are standing on. And so we'll talk a little bit more about this, but Elizabeth and I were able to attend the first James Welch Writers Festival in Missoula, Montana. And, we'll pat ourselves on the back a little bit. We were like special guests because of our family. It was really cool. We got to hang out with Louise Erdrich. Oh my gosh. And all these speculative fiction authors. We were kind of nerding around.
We got to go to the after party with all the authors. There was no layman non-authors there, so it was very special.
Yeah, we've got some photographs. Oh, sorry. Talking in the mic. All right. Thank you, Tanya. And then this makes me want to sing karaoke. So just be careful. Be careful what you wish for. Okay, so we're going to be talking about James Welch and one of his novels, which was Fool's Crow, which was written about our family history. And we'll talk more about that here shortly. We're going to highlight, so be prepared. We're going to be highlighting a historical moment, which is the Bear River Massacre of 1870. So just know some tough conversations are coming up, so whatever you need to do to take care of yourself in these moments. And also the significance of Feather Woman, or Sauk-Suiattle, who is a Blackfoot supernatural figure in our traditional stories and in James Welch's work. We're also going to incorporate the 6 Ps of anti-colonial frameworks by Leilani Sabzalian, and also highlight the need for land-based learning to connect historical events with contemporary Indigenous experiences. We want to stress the importance of personal and collective narratives in education. Okay, so we're going to, hold on just a sec, Koo. This is, Elizabeth. There's always family names, and when you're with your kids, just can't help yourself. So you can call me Mom. We have a couple of questions for you to reflect upon as we go through this process. So how can Native literature, speculative fiction, and critical land-based family history make Indigenous history more accessible? We're also going to grapple with what are some of the effective tools for exploring our collective and personal relationships with Indigenous histories, and how can we center Native thrivance? Thrivance, just in a brief definition, as thriving as resistance. Our thriving is one of the most powerful tools for decolonization. And so we'll be centering Native thrivance and our shared commitment to a more just and equitable world in our teaching of Native history, governance, and culture. So we're going to engage you in some Indigenous story work by Joanne Archibald, who's a Stolo scholar in British Columbia. And she talks about story work or storying as the healing power and influence of story. So we're going to tell 3 stories tonight. Feather Woman, or this afternoon. Feather Woman and the Connections to Land. Truth-telling Indigenous history with the Bear River Massacre of 1870. And Elizabeth, would you share the last one, because you're so much better at saying this than I am?
Ki anatoyi imitax.
The tale is complete. And it actually translates as,
And the dogs have separated.
so at the end of the night, after lots of talking and everyone's been telling stories and all the food's been eaten and the dogs are tired and they go off to sleep, that is the time at the end of the story. So we hope also that you will be inspired to embark on your own critical land-based family history journeys as well. Okay, Elizabeth. Awesome. So before we do some formal introductions and get into the more personal stuff, we wanted to also give you like a theoretical foundation of what we're talking about. So for those of you who have seen me before, and I'm so happy to be back, we did a presentation here about the article we wrote about composting settler colonial distortions and cultivating critical land-based family history. And so this is just kind of a brief overview of what that looks like. So we kind of bring together Kristen Sleater, who was here before as well. Kristen Sleater is an amazing critical white scholar. And she challenges her predominantly white teacher candidates to transform the standard family genealogy curriculum into a critical research process, understanding themselves as cultural beings, as well as understanding institutional discrimination. She sees this critical family history as critical theoretical traditions as an analysis of how one's family has been constructed historically within and through relations of power. She also, in her critical family history work, she engages with family power and resources, genealogical research using primary documentation, oral history, and analysis of historical, social, and political resources situating ancestors within a larger local and historical context rather than just as individuals. So we've adapted one of Kristen Sleater's tools in the process, so you'll see that, and hopefully you'll be able to get an example that you might be able to use with students or for yourself. The next is land-based learning, and when we talk about land-based learning with the capital L, it refers not just to the materiality of land, but to the familial, intimate, intergenerational, and instructive aspect of land with a capital L. And it's rooted in decolonizing frameworks and praxis that critically trouble and disrupt colonial myths. And land as political, land as contextual, land as relational. We also have the anti-colonial and decolonizing frameworks. I'm really skeptical of using decolonization because I'm in the camp with Eve Tuck. When we talk about decolonization, it needs to mean land back, lifeways back. So if we're not participating in the action of land and lifeways back, then maybe a different terminology should be used. So in general, in teacher education, I use anti-colonial frameworks. So it's, and I really appreciate the scholar Lee Patel when she talks about anti-colonial makes visible the ways which coloniality must be known to be countered. And decolonial should always address material changes. So when we talk about colonialism or anti-colonialism, this is probably the places mostly we see in our classrooms. So just to be cautious of that. She also goes on to say that critique is necessary for noting the contours of colonial logics, but it's insufficient for imagining into existence praxis that decolonize. But we're going to kind of talk a little bit today about how we think Indigenous speculative fiction kind of gives us some of those tools. And I hope you come back tonight because Elizabeth's going to lead this evening's presentation and really go in there with Indigenous speculative fiction for healing. So, and the last section here is unsettling reflexivity. So this is kind of our method, an ethnographic method of data collection analysis that helps us contextualize and uproot the ways that settler colonialism epistemologies invade research and are so ubiquitous that they go unnoticed and unavoided. So we ask that with an unsettling reflexivity, it asks us to refuse to feed the settler colonial gaze that seeks to assuage settler anxiety by arming the racial logics of settler colonialism in place. So we agree that it's not enough for us just to know about settler colonialism, that we need to do something about it and be critically reflective. So that's the one big chunk, and we're also looking at Indigenous speculative fiction.
It's my slide. we have any fans of science fiction in the room? Okay, nice. 1, 2. How about horror? No horror fans. No Stephen King fans? Oh, we got Cody in the back. How about fantasy? Okay, cool. Yes, great. So without, my mom is an amazing academic. I'm just a farmer who loves to read. So to me, speculative fiction is all about the work. And so you see in our slide 5 works of indigenous speculative fiction that speak to imagining worlds beyond the settler colonialism that my mom so beautifully set up a theoretical framework for. So speculative fiction is a genre that encompasses fantasy, horror, and science fiction, but more importantly, it offers us a way to build just and inclusive futures, to critique and bear witnesses to the injustices of the past and present, and perhaps more importantly, to offer us all hope of extricating ourselves from the dire future we face as a species and that we inflict on other species and the earth, should we not urgently institute change. So, for example, the Marrow Thieves novels by Cherie Dimaline focus on, or the premise of them is that in a not too distant future, the Canadian government has reinstated residential schools because there's a pandemic of dreamlessness in non-native populations. And so in order to have non-native folks dream again because they're suffering mental illness because they can't dream, these residential schools start harvesting the bone marrow of indigenous peoples. And so when you think about works of speculative fiction, they're at the one hand especially indigenous speculative fiction, and especially the Marrow Thieves, they're talking about reflecting and digesting the horrors of the past, examining the effects in the present, and then creating a cautionary tale to make sure that those horrors of the past don't happen again. And I think that we can apply some of that learning today using Fool's Crow, which is a story that was written by our relative, and we'll talk more about it.
Thank you, Elizabeth. So we also want to talk a little bit about what does it mean to have our anti-colonial frameworks for, and this is Leilani Subzalian's work. She also wrote this great book by Shimke and Edmondson that is teaching about Lewis and Clark. So some of you might be familiar because Leilani Subzalian is actually in Eugene. And so she's just amazing. So this is one of my favorite tools to use with students. So, and we're not going to go through each of these in detail right now, but we're going to examine a couple of them. But I just want to give some heads up that first of all, that the 6 Ps are place, presence, perspectives, political nationhood, power, and partnerships. And so place is really important because all land that we're on is Indigenous land. And so it's really important for us to be aware of that. And what I really appreciate when she talks about this, she also says that we need to go beyond the land acknowledgement. And we came here a couple years ago and talked about that, right? When land acknowledgements were really sexy, right? And so now it's like, okay, they're really fun to do, but we actually have to put action. So I want to just applaud you all. I want to applaud Tanya for having a land acknowledgement that is meaningful, and it is about creating right and respectful relationships with the Indigenous communities and doing the work of that. But so Leilani Subzalian also talks about the curriculum that we need should be land-based and center local Indigenous presence, issues, and priorities. So we'll hold that as we move forward. Presence, that it's really important for us to see Native people in the present day, not just what we know about standards and about history in U.S. classrooms is that the majority of if anything is taught, if it's in the standards, if anything's taught, it's usually pre-1900, which in the settler colonial frameworks and characteristics is all about erasure, right? So we need to be able to talk about the current moment. What are the ways that Indigenous folks are addressing the issues that they are experiencing and doing that through their own perspectives? So perspectives is next. It's that we need to explicitly, ground our perspectives in Indigenous ways of knowing and being and challenge some of those Eurocentric or settler colonial narratives. So this means that we need to actually ask people from communities to speak about themselves. In terms of political nationhood, this one is also big because Native folks are often categorized racially or ethnically as a minority within the United States, which isn't untrue in the ways that folks get categorized. But Indigenous folks are sovereign. They're sovereign peoples that belong to sovereign nations. So we have a political nationhood identity as well. What's really important too in terms of power is that we need to understand settler colonialism, name it, and also we have a responsibility to challenge it. And we also need to talk about the ways that settler colonialism is part of the US foundation. So that's in terms of how does that affect our democracy, our notions of freedom and justice in the United States, that we have built our nation on the genocide of Native folks and also the enslavement of Black Americans. So finally, in terms of partnerships, this is also really important because we need to make sure that we are working in community with Native folks, always and forever. We have this great line with our tribal liaison at Western. It's nothing about us without us, and Laurel, our tribal liaison, is for us. So again, always thinking about how can we be in community with each other. Thanks, Elizabeth. And then, and also coming back to Christine Sleater. Christine Sleater, who does the critical family history, so we're kind of blending both. Christine Sleater is generally doing her critical family history work with European American students in her classrooms. So, and doing critical family history, you know, I do this every quarter and it's really fun. And a lot of my students have never examined their own history, have never asked their elders about where they come from, what languages they spoke when their ancestors came to the United States. A lot of that has been forgotten. And I share with them, there's a reason for that. And so she provides these questions for us to be thinking about. And so we're going to highlight two of these throughout this process today. But I hope that you take some time to look at these and think about how they might also participate in your own experiences. Okay, so before we get into our introductions, this is your first opportunity to get on your Mentimeter. And so after hearing all of the theoretical foundation for where we're going today, what do you hope to leave with? What is something that you would like to get out of our time with you today? So just take a moment, and your posting will be anonymous unless you put your name on it. And feel free to talk to each other too about what you hope. What do you hope to leave with today? Ooh, look at this, is so cool. It's so big up here too. It is. What's really nice about this is that you do, Unku. is that we can download your responses in this PowerPoint and give it to Tanya. So you'll have this as another wonderful artifact of this time together. Ooh, great. This is great. Yep. We're definitely going to address spirituality as well. Great. Great.
For that person, come on Saturday.
Yeah.
Because we're gonna do so many activities. You're gonna leave saying, "Oh my gosh, what just happened?" We've got lots of fun plans.
I love leaving wanting more. Yes. And as far as, understanding disability in our society, I love that because, just as a side note, I sit on our disproportionality committee for our local school district on the disproportionate number of Native students in special education in our schools. And doing that research and being a part of that team has been really eye-opening. And so I would love to have more time to talk about that. Great. Awesome. All right, we're going to hold these because hopefully we'll come back at the end, and if we don't respond to these, please bring them back to us because we definitely want to make this presentation meaningful to each of you. Thank you so much. Oh, great. Okay. Elizabeth? I know. Thank you. This is so great. All right. So we're gonna move into a little bit more of the personal part. So Oki Nixagwax, Nisto Nitanako Asanaki.
Oki, Nixacoax, Ninistaniku Maats Och Matsta Aki.
We just introduced ourselves to you, and you'll see our Blackfeet names on a slide coming up here. But we wanted to really share that when we come into this space, we don't come just the two of us. We bring our ancestors with us. And so these three beautiful women are very much with us today. This first gorgeous lady was Elizabeth's grandmother and my mom, Sandra Welch French. And this was her grandmother, my great-grandmother, Elizabeth's great-great-grandmother, and her name was Ellen Welch, but her Blackfeet name was also Asanaki. And here in the middle, highlighted, is Long-Hairing Woman. And you might recognize the name as the name of Elizabeth's farm. And so Long-Hairing Woman is also identified as Red Paint or Asanaki. She was born around 1852. Ellen was born 1882, and my mom was born in 1936. When Long-Hairing Woman was given a Christian name, she was called Mary Jane Red Paint because her father's name was Red Paint, so that became her surname. And then she gave that name to. Oh yeah. So Ellen is Asanaki, and I'm Asanaki, which is Red Paint Woman. Okay. They're going to be with us throughout this presentation. Oh. I'm just jumping ahead to Elizabeth because I want to hear more about Elizabeth. Okay. There's somebody who is also missing in this presentation, and we were just talking about him this morning, that we wish that one of these days he'll be presenting with us, and that is Charlie French. Charlie French's Blackfeet name is Onista Soyis, which is buffalo calf tail. And he was named after my grandfather, Elizabeth's great-grandfather, whose name was also Charlie. And so he carries a very powerful name. And so we wanted to start here too, because it's not just those three amazing women who are with us, but it's also the land. And so the land that you see here, this image, which you'll see throughout all the slides, and what I've started to do as I teach on Zoom is to have this on my background. This slide is long-hairing woman's allotment land that she was allotted. And she was actually allotted this early on and before most people did. And that's another presentation, but that was in 1888. And so isn't it gorgeous? Isn't that absolutely beautiful? I wish I could say that that land is still ours, but it is not. But we are in the process of developing a relationship with the current landowners and the folks and learning the history of how that land left our family. But land is about our identity. And it's critical to our identity. So this is a photograph of Elizabeth and Charlie and myself on her homestead site, her allotment site, where the house was. And it was really powerful to be there. And in the background, if you're standing on the land and you're looking off into the north, you'll see Feather Woman Mountain. And that's the story we're going to share with you today, is about Feather Woman. So Rosalind Lapierre, an amazing Blackfeet scholar who wrote this great book, Invisible Reality, she talks about landscape as being a mnemonic device. So we imagine that long-hairing woman, as she's gathering prairie turnips or gathering medicines on the land or tending to her garden, that she could look out every day and see Feather Woman Mountain and be reminded of those stories. My mom, Jim Welch, the writer of Fool's Crow, he was a little younger than my mom, and so he didn't ever actually meet long-hairing woman, but my mom did. My mom learned from her for 7 years of her life, and she talked about long-hairing woman. She didn't speak English, and we like to think that she refused to speak English. She was tiny and she was precious, and she wore long skirts with pockets all the way down to the hems. And she would smoke a pipe and she would tell her children, her grandchildren, and her great-grandchildren stories. Now, my mom never was a speaker of Blackfeet, but as a child from birth to 7, she would sit and listen to long-hairing women, and she understood the stories. So she was probably early on in her little life multilingual, which is pretty cool. All right. So just quickly, this is how you would see my name, Red Paint Woman, Asana Key. And again, named after my great-grandmother, Ellen Welch. And also the name Red Paint is the name that you would see as the protagonist's partner in Fool's Crow. So it's really quite an honor to hold that name. And so it's really important for us to learn from our elders and our family and community and our histories and our land. So this is the picture that was on the posters for today. This is of me and Elizabeth, and we are out of our mind joyful. We're just outside of the allotment land of long-hairing woman on Birch Creek, and we just met some really amazing, more than human, joyful creatures. But what we want you to do is to think about, so we are super inspired by these beautiful women. We want to know who inspires you. So go back onto your Mentimeter and just put in, it could just be one name or a person, it could be anyone. Who is it that inspires you?
You inspire me, Mom.
Put it in the Mentimeter. Oh, look at this. Oh my gosh. Ah. Oh, wow, this is beautiful. I'd have to put Tanya. Wow, this is so great. This is so great. Look at all this love. Okay, let's hold them. We're bringing them into this conversation, and we're going to hold loving space for them. Oh, I love it.
So my name is Ma'at Matsta'aki, and that translates into English as Fine Victory Woman. And my name is also a family name, but it's a combination on another Blackfeet side of several different names. And I can say from my own personal experience that receiving a name has been totally transformative for me as a person, and has connected me to my Blackfeet identity in a way that I didn't even know was possible until we went through that ceremony. And the reason that we wanted to share about Long Hearing Farm is because my mom and I have been partnering for many years since I started the farm in 2019 to host students from our Western Washington University's Native American Student Union, which I'm sure that those of you who've seen my mom present, she's talked about. But this land-based learning, there's pictures up here, is we actually just finished our annual nettle harvest. So we had, how many students, like 20? Yeah, like 20 students came out to the farm. It was a beautiful, gorgeous day. And we, not only do we harvest nettles and talk about the honorable harvest and create opportunities for students to learn about, well, which nettles do I harvest and what do I need to prepare to do? And I see that there's a trillium flower in the near the nettles. What's the honorable harvest for other types of plants? And so we kind of do that through the practice of actually harvesting the nettles. But then we also sit by the river and reflect. And some students just, they finished harvesting nettles and they just went and laid in the grass, in the sun. I recently had a local educator. I live in a rural place called Darrington, Washington, and she told me, and I don't know if this is true, but the average student only spends 7 minutes a day outside. And so I looked at those students just laying with joy and just complete rest in the grass, and I thought, that's land-based learning right there. The land is doing it for you. All you have to do is get those students on the land, and something transformative is going to happen. I don't know if that was what I was supposed to say.
That was perfect. So, okay. Oh, and this was a video, and maybe if we have time, we can share it. But it didn't work out. It's a video of us meeting Kistaki, a beaver. We're like beaver nerds, and actually bison nerds and bear nerds. I don't know. We have a lot of friends. But the beaver just got off the shore and just swam to us. And we were having this beautiful moment on Long Hearing Woman's land, and to have that connection. So please share with us on Mentimeter connections you have to the natural world. Maybe it's water, maybe it's a plant, maybe it's an animal, anything. Oh, look at this.
And just a plug for traditional ecological knowledge. We had the opportunity to take a class led by Blackfeet elders who talked about the beaver is one of the most spiritually and religiously significant supernatural allies in Blackfeet ways of knowing and being. And one of the classes was just totally dedicated to beaver. Why beaver was so important to us as Blackfeet. And it's because of Kistaki's relationship with water. Because the Blackfeet are, traditional territory spans a lot of the Great Plains up to the Rocky Mountains. And so water and the creation of water and the stewardship of water is one of the reasons that Kistaki is so important. So what did people say?
This is just making me really happy. This is really, really happy. And we know that beavers are a keystone species. And so when we have, when beavers are living in our communities and in our waterways, they are helping to heal and make our waters.
I just want to say one more thing about beavers, and then I'll stop. Has anyone heard about in like Norway or Sweden, they were trying to engineer a dam? Yeah, you heard about this? And they were just like, you know what, whatever, we'll just leave it. This isn't working. We can't make the engineering work. And then beavers came in and they finished this really complex engineering process. They did it. They built this crazy complex dam. Okay, stop.
And one of my favorite things about Marrow Thieves is is it Wobb's coming to story when they find her in the beaver. Yes. Okay. Nerding out for just a moment here. Okay. Thank you all for being there with us. Okay. A next Mentimeter question for you to be thinking about as we talk about this is a book that inspires you. So the rest of our time today, we're going to be engaging with this book that we love, and there's an image of the new cover up here, which is Fool's Crow. And so these images around the edges are images of artistic recreations of James Welch, the author himself. And this, as we promised, this is Elizabeth, Charlie, and I, and Elizabeth's farm partner Kelly, attending so this is like we're so cool that we're at the James Welch Writers Festival, and there's this beautiful sculpture in their yard, in James Welch's yard, which is this trout. And so there we are. And if we look really happy, it's because all of the native authors that we love are wandering around us, and we were nerding out. Okay. So this is a favorite book, and I'll just say, as you are identifying would you go ahead and the book that you love, books that you love, that I was introduced to Fool's Crow in 1987, and it was published in 1986. Of course, there's been multiple versions. It's been in print since it was written, and I was a kind of a challenging teenager. And my mom and the family we were living in Tacoma, and my mom went to our reservation, Browning, Montana, and I decided to stay home because I had a job and I didn't want to miss the job. But really, I just, wanted to be a rotten teenager. But instead of being a rotten teenager, what I did is I picked up the book that was on the table and I read it from beginning to end. I sat on that pink couch and read Fool's Crow. This copy of Fool's Crow, which is just barely, it's almost disintegrating. And it was the first book I ever read from the beginning to end by choice. And it changed my life. So I love A River Runs Through. Oh, these are great. Oh, this is so wonderful. I love the spiritual nature of our readings too. This is great. Ooh, awesome. Okay, this is your book list. Awesome. I know you can put multiple down. You can have as many books as you love. All right, let's hold these books with us as well. I love wintering. I use wintering in my class, actually. Great. Thank you. Okay, so a little bit about Fool's Crow, and so we wanted to bring Lois into this. Lois, so James passed in 2003, and Lois, as his wife, and we are in community with Lois. She still lives in Missoula. She had a stroke a couple years ago, but she is just like sharp as a tack. And she just talks about how, she has just a little less mobility, but she is like the most incredible woman, and we're so grateful to be family with her. So we early on said that Fool's Crow, we're identifying it as speculative fiction. So this might be like a mic drop thing, because I don't think I've ever heard anyone else talk about Fool's Crow as speculative fiction, but we're just like, oh, it is totally speculative fiction. And it's in the genre of Native American literature. It's considered historical fiction. But I love this quote from Lois, because she says, I'm not sure Jim had ever even read a historical novel, but the story he wanted to tell was nothing if not historical. The story of the way of life of his people before they were brought low by smallpox and then the massacre by the U.S. Army one January morning in 1870. Before is the crucial term here. There would be no evading smallpox or the massacre. Those events ended the Blackfeet way of life as we knew it pre-colonization. But they weren't the whole story. There was life before and after. Jim had grown increasingly aware that the whole story was needed, so a historical novel was what he was obliged to write. And I am so grateful for that. So this is Lois, and this, of course, you can see in the background. Again, this is not where we have all the cool authors, but we have cool Lois. And just to say a little bit about Lois, Lois was the head of the English department at the University of Montana. So she is a scholar, and so one of the things that she talks about in terms of Jim's writing process was that when he was writing Fool's Crow, he would go to the sites and he would make maps. So this is really important. This is the land-based learning about any of these stories. And then he also would lay out this whole picture on graph line of the historical moments. But not only did he put the historical moments in his imagining of the book Fool's Crow, but he also put the Bear River Massacre on the map. And so I'm going to ask a little bit of you here in a moment about what you may or may not have learned about that. I think what's also, this is a love story. They loved each other so much. They're one of those couples that you're like, ugh, because they're just so madly in love. And so, of course, the loss has been felt really deeply. But Lois also talks about how Jim was very humble and was a very quiet person and was described as a writer's writer. Like, he didn't really like to do a lot of public engagements. He just loved to write. But he had a lot of community. He supported a lot of Native writers. But he would not be interested in a memoir or anything. But she is actually writing a Jimoir. And I cannot wait for that to be published. I really wanted to show some videos, and I'm glad I decided not to because of time. But Jim is really famous in Europe, and the French actually absolutely love him. And his last book was written about a Lakota man who was in the the Buffalo Bill show that went to Europe. They traveled through Europe, and actually this Native person gets lost and ends up having to live in Europe for a while. It's a really awesome story. And so this is actually a video of him talking about our family history, but you can't really hear it because it's dubbed over in Italian. And so if you're a speaker of Italian, I would really encourage you to watch this. There aren't too many interviews with Jim. And so, but I think what he said in here, if you do the closed captions, or I got to figure out how to get rid of the voiceover, because it would be really wonderful to hear his own voice a little bit more clearly. But in an article in the Bozeman Chronicle, which was talking about, Fool's Crow has been banned. It's a banned book in some places, which is kind of hard to believe because it's so beautiful. But he actually responded to that with this interview. And so I want to share with you that he wrote that his great-grandmother, Red Paint Woman, was wounded in the leg in the Baker Massacre, which is also what we call the Bear River Massacre. At the end of Fool's Crow, Welch's hero meets a small group of massacre survivors, including a woman wounded in the leg. They had escaped by hiding in a cut bank. This is my great-great-grandmother's story, long-hairing woman's story. She hid in an embankment and was able to survive with her father, who was shot in the leg, and her sister and her brother. So he says, this actually happened to my great-grandmother, Welch said. I wanted to put that as a tribute to her. So all these years, we're so connected to her. She had lived a life of following the buffalo, of living off the land. When Welch's father was a boy, she was an old woman. She died before Welch was born, but she had told his father a lot of stories, and he in turn told me, said Jim. So we're building up this story for you. Now, we have very little primary documentation about what happened to long-hairing women. But we found I don't know if you all are familiar with Conrad, Montana? Nope. Oh, really? Oh my gosh, that's fantastic. Okay, so you know Conrad is very small. And so this is a writing from, it's kind of like, it looked like a yearbook. It's a really interesting history. It's a community-based history from 1937, the year after my mom was born. And in this document, it says, Mrs. Charlie Pemister and her husband, Charlie, also Charlie was named after my grandfather and my great-grandfather. She was a little girl then, is still living in Browning. She got away with her brother and sister and father being shot, but living for some time. So this is one of the only primary documents we have about her lived experiences. Not too many women's stories were documented at that time. Go ahead, Elizabeth. So just to be going back, keeping in mind this curriculum piece too, with the critical family history, Christine Sleater asks us, what kinds of relationships did my ancestors have with members of other groups around them? So how and why was most of my family history forgotten or suppressed for those who may not have a lot of information, or for those of you working with students who might be doing some critical family history work? So we're just gonna do a quick Mentimeter. Just feel free, if you feel so inspired, to respond to this question. You know, depending on where your family's settled, if you're indigenous to this area, that might look a little bit different, but some of you might be from LeGrand. Like, there's such juicy history here, and we were excited last night to have an opportunity to ask some questions, like about, we were Poverty Flats, and what was, yeah, like where did that come from? Yeah. And so what was interesting in the conversations we had last night was very similar to what happened in Montana. A lot of mining brought people to these areas, which were traditional homelands for many of our ancestors. So please feel free to answer these questions. We're gonna continue to go forward. And Elizabeth is going to share a story. So whoever was asking about spirituality, so we're gonna share from Fool's Crow. This is a part of the book. So as we know, the book was set in the 1860s and it ends in 1870. And so in this section of the book that Elizabeth's gonna read a little segment from, the protagonist, Fool's Crow, is struggling with all the challenges that they're seeing coming. They know something's coming. So he goes on a vision quest, and he doesn't think it's working, and then he meets Feather Woman.
You have seen something, said Feather Woman. They walked together down toward the river. Sun was still high above them. Morning Star and Star Boy were up there too, but hidden by sun's brilliance. It is difficult for her to know that they are up there, far away, but there where they can look down upon her any time they wish, he thought. And for the first time, he came to think of them, the above ones, as cruel spirits to allow Feather Woman to suffer so, and to allow what he had seen. Yes, he said. His voice was flat but edged. It makes you angry? Fool's Crow stopped and looked at her. No, he said. I am not angry. Anger can sometimes do a man good, but now it is futile. I am not angry now, and I will not be angry then, when it all happens as I saw it on the yellow skin. There is much good you can do for your people, said Feather Woman. Fool's Crow looked toward the river. His black buffalo runner stood patiently, saddled and bridled, his eyes studying something far downstream. You can prepare them for the times to come. If they make peace within themselves, they will live a good life in the sandhills. There they will go on to live as they always have. Things will not change. I do not fear for my people now. As you say, we will go to a happier place, far from these Napiquans, this disease and starvation. But I grieve for our children and their children, who will not know the life their people once lived. I see them on the yellow skin, and they are dressed like the Napiquans. They watch the Napiquans and learn from them, but they are not happy. They lose their own way. Much will be lost to them, said Feather Woman, but they will know the way it was. The stories will be handed down. They will see that their people were proud and lived in accordance with the below ones, the underwater people, and the above ones. Fool's Crow stood for a moment, considering Feather Woman. He thought of her transgression in digging the sacred turnip. Morning Star had said she would bring misery not only on herself, but on her people by that act. And the misery was only beginning. But she was a good woman. Her only sin was one of loneliness, then and now and forever. She had been punished, and the people were being punished for a reason that Fool's Crow could not understand. The people had always lived in harmony with their sacred beings. Always they had performed the ceremonies to the best of their ability. They sacrificed often and without stinginess, and yet they were being punished. He stepped forward and hugged the woman with the cut-off hair and blue eyes. Her elkskin dress was warm beneath his hands. Then he walked quickly to the black horse and swung up on his back. He glanced at her, and she was smiling, and her eyes were bright. He dug his heels into the horse's side, and the horse began that fast, easy trot. He was glad to be returning to his people, but he could not help feeling that someday he would like to come back to Feather Woman and this green sanctuary between earth and sky.
So this particular, would you go to the next slide, Elizabeth? So this particular scene in the book, he travels to this space. We don't know if he's dreaming or if it's a vision. And he comes upon this land that is completely green and beautiful, kind of thinking about like long-hairing woman's allotment land. And she is not in the sandhills, which would be our spiritual place that we go. She is in an in-between space. And because of what happened. So we want to tell you a little bit about what happened to her. So this is the imaginings of a fiction writer in communication with a supernatural being. And she becomes an ally. And so we also want to highlight some of the things that come through in this story that you're going to be hearing from Dr. Rosalind Lapierre, who is the author, the Blackfeet author, and she's an ethnobotanist. And so she talks about, so this is a little bit more of the Feather Woman story. The story of Ma, which is the prairie turnip, centers on a human feather woman. So she was a human before she was supernatural. She married a star, a morning star, the son of the moon and this sun. Feather Woman moved to the sky world to live with her husband and in-laws. The moon became her mentor, teaching Feather Woman about the various plants in the sky world. The importance of water. Again, you're hearing again and again. Water is so important. And several spiritual and religious rituals. Moon also gave her daughter-in-law a digging stick for harvesting. So here's an example of an image that was painted of a Blackfeet woman with a digging stick. Very important. So the digging stick was specifically for harvesting prairie turnips. And so she was instructed by Feather Woman, or the moon instructed Feather Woman not to dig up a particularly large prairie turnip in the sky world. So, of course, as it goes, and she was human, she just couldn't help herself. It's a giant prairie turnip. Like I don't know if you've ever tried to dig up a prairie turnip, but they're really hard to dig up, and you have to get, really, it is work. So if you could get a giant prairie turnip, that could probably last you for a really long time. I'm not judging. So her curiosity grew, and one day she dug it up. Now she got some supernatural help, which is also talked about in Fool's Crow, from some geese. They're the geese. But anyway, Feather Woman eventually returned to Earth, so this is I'll improvise here a little bit. She dug up the prairie turnip, and she tried to hide it. But these are supernatural beings. And so her husband, Morningstar, took one look at her and said, "How could you?" And so the moon and the sun said, now you're going to be lonely, which she was. As soon as she lifted that prairie turnip, that sacred prairie turnip, she looked down through the hole and she could see her family. And she got lonesome for her family. She saw her parents and her family and her community. And so that loneliness would never leave her. So she had to be sent back down to Earth to be with her people. But even though she was punished and having to leave the sky world, she was able to take her baby with her, and he became a very important figure in our Blackfeet ideology. She was given many wonderful gifts by the moon that were really important to humankind. And many of those had to do with our plant medicines. Sweetgrass, she gave the gift of the digging stick and also other amazing tools. So she became different from the way that James Welch writes about Feather Woman in this fictionalized version. She actually became a teacher and taught Blackfeet women how to harvest and preserve berries and other plants. And then she brought back also teachings about honorable harvest, not over harvesting, because she learned a lesson, right? When you need to not harvest something, there's a reason for it. We don't want to take too much and then not have enough for everyone. So this was about landscape management and reseeding, and also still having abundance. So Feather Woman's role is really important in the teaching about our sacred Okan, which is often referred to as the sun dance. So her story is retold and reenacted similar to a passion play every summer when we have the Okan, and our spiritual leaders talk about the Okan as being the time of renewal. So we get to renew our lives during that time, which is also heralded by Saskatoon berries. So I don't know if you're all familiar with Saskatoons or Sarvis or service berries, they're called Okotoks and Blackfeet. Okay, Elizabeth, I think we're gonna just do some Zoom. We're gonna Zoom. So just, get on your Mentimeter just quickly, just what might have moved you about the fictional version or the real storytelling about Feather Woman. And be thinking about maybe there's stories in your lives that have these also deep connections. And we're gonna.
Also, isn't it just nice to be read to? I love reading out loud to folks. I think it's a powerful experience.
I love it too. Elizabeth's a great reader. Okay, So just quickly, we're going to be thinking about also in Christine Sleater's curriculum, what roles did my ancestors play in the colonization of Indigenous peoples? Harder question. These are hard ones to be thinking about. And so we're just going to go ahead and move forward because we're down to 15 minutes. So I just have a quick question of you. How many of you, because we're going to be talking about the Bear River Massacre, also known as the Baker's Massacre or the Marias Massacre, how many of you were taught about the Bear River Massacre in your schooling experience? Yeah, I think I would have been really surprised if I had seen that people learned about this. So you might have heard about the Sand Creek Massacre or other massacres, but these were all happening around the same time, and they had a huge impact on our history. So we're going to play very quickly, just a little, so you get to see Jim. Oh, can we do that from here? Oh, okay. No, we're going to play it. Oops. Hold on, how do I do that? Oh, I think I can do it from here. Oh. I'm gonna fall out. Don't do it. Okay, so I think I have to X out for just or no, go to. It's hard to see from here.
I can see.
Can you? Oh yeah.
Here, I'll just go up and do it.
Oh, would you please? Yeah. Okay. So this is just we're gonna just watch about a minute of Jim talking about. It's the first one, Elizabeth. There you go. No, it's not. Yep. Okay, we're just gonna play for about 1 minute.
North knew about these events. They knew about the massacre on the Marias River, which happened in 1870, which is what I describe in the book to actually begin the book, because it happened to my own people, the Blackfeet, and which 173 Indian people, men, women, and children, were killed. So they were well aware of this idea of removing the Indians from this country by any means possible, even if it meant slaughtering them. I mean, even if it meant genocide. It was estimated that in the mid-19th century there were like 5 million Indian people in the contiguous United States area. By 1900 there were 238,000 Indians left. So I don't
that
think
in North America?
in the United States part of North
Okay.
America. So it becomes clear a lot of them died of diseases that they weren't prepared for, especially smallpox. But also they were wiped out. It wasn't beyond any stretch of imagination to believe that a policy of genocide, even if it was unspoken, was part of the overall strategy to remove Indians.
There's Phil Sheridan.
In the military violence against Native folks. So we're going to quickly move back into the, thank you, Elizabeth. Okay, so here's another tool from Christine Sleater that I think is really helpful to help us process some of these things that we're learning about. And she talks about, especially for folks who have immigrated to the United States from somewhere, which is many people in the U.S., she said that there's like the 4 P factors. There's the push, pull, and punishing factors. So why did folks leave their homes? So like what was necessary for this violence against Native folks to take the land? And so it was to make space, right? And to for the newcomers. And this was happening right during and after the Civil War. So what were some of the pull factors for ancestors who would go to a particular place? What were some of the punishing factors? Just because someone immigrated and maybe was European American, especially if you were Irish or Italian or German, you were marginalized within the United States, especially if you were not speaking English. But also, what might have been some of the privileging factors that ancestors experienced when they moved here? Okay, we're going to just quickly We're going to keep going. Sorry, Elizabeth. Okay, so this is another tool that we wanted to share with you. So we have adapted Christine Sleater's context questions framework. So this is a way to help students kind of engage with the historical moment. So you'll notice over here under date, so we're talking about dawn on January 23rd, 1870. It was 20 degrees below zero. That's the date. The family history part here is that long-hairing woman was one of the few survivors of this massacre. She and her father, who was shot in the leg and wounded, her brother and sister, survived, but then they had to walk 80 miles in 20 below temperatures and to get to Fort Benton. And the conditions were so terrible that many of the survivors who did survive the early morning dawn attack on the heavy runner band did not survive the march to Fort Benton. Also, so understanding the historical context. So what was happening? Why did this take place? Well, it took place for a variety of reasons, so I'm not going to go into all the details here because of time. But Eugene Baker, who was told to, there was a gentleman who was murdered, and he was murdered by a Blackfeet person who was taking revenge for sexual violence that had happened to a family member. So he was murdered. And so this was a big issue at that time. It was trying to keep Native folks under control as lots of settlers were coming into the area. So they knew full well that the group that they were looking for was not the Heavy Runner Band, which was our family's band. And in the early dawn of that morning, the cavalry came in and they started shooting and then burning down all of the lodges. Most of the people who were in the encampment at the time were children and women and people who were dying of smallpox. And most of the men were gone because they were trying to search for whatever bison or game that was left. And so just in terms of like could you go back for just a sec, Koo? The socio-political context. So what was going on in the nation at that time? So at the nation of that time was President Ulysses S. Grant was really, he was really offended by the fact that this massacre had taken place because there was public outrage. And mostly because people on the East Coast were horrified when they heard this was happening. It was very different conditions in Montana at that time. The folks that were there were very happy about this. And at the time, Grant was trying to do, and for those of you who are history buffs, you know that Grant was trying to do a bunch of things. He had a peace policy initiation. He was trying to make changes by appointing Eli Parker as the Commissioner of Indian Affairs. And one of the things that happened, legislative action that happened after this attack was that the Bureau of Indian Affairs left the War Department, or it was the working with Native folks politically, sociopolitically, left the War Department and became part of the Bureau of the Interior. But I want to come back to this notion of the land-based context. This is really important. This is the addition that we don't often talk about when we look at these. So it was the end of a way of life for our families. And this spot on the Marias, when I went there with Charlie, it was like, I thought for sure I'd be angry, but I was sad. I just sobbed and sobbed and sobbed. I couldn't stop because that wasn't a place of massacre. That was a place since time immemorial of people gathering in the wintertime. I could hear children laughing and people gathering berries and they were doing medicine gathering, and it was a favorite place, as Roz Lapierre talks about, for wintering horses, and specifically in the historical documentation for the families to have fun time. So that's what that place was, And of course, it changed after this historical moment. So we only have a few minutes left, so I'm going to go ahead. We wanted to, hold on, if you could just go back. We wanted to, this is actually a photograph we took of the site. It isn't official because there hasn't been any archaeological dig. It's farmland, so it really depends on the property owners about folks getting access to that. But this is based on the history and based on the narratives where we believe it was. What we wanted to do here is share with you the description in the book to kind of give you a sense of how do we talk about these horrible events from the perspective of storytelling and to bring it into your heart. So you'll just have to read the book. It's really, I can't read it without crying. It's just it just continues to keep going. So again, we really are highlighting learning from the perspectives of Indigenous people, but also really grappling with the settler colonialism and how do we interrupt that. Go ahead, Elizabeth. And just kind of coming full circle, in the end of the book, Jim writes about, Feather Woman's vision on this elk hide shows Fool's Crow the crucial events that are going to take place that will end the Blackfeet way of life. Epidemic, massacre by the U.S. Army, the starvation winter where 500 people died because the U.S. government did not provide the rations that were agreed upon during treaty negotiations. The decimation of the buffalo, which is huge. That was if you're going to destroy a people, destroy their food source, destroy their way of living. And so in this, he recognizes each of them and is appalled, but then he's instructed by Feather Woman. And by her giving him that knowledge of what's to come, he's more reflective about it and more courageous than he may have been when he saw these things take place. Okay, last. So I guess we could end with, this is the last part of the book. Gosh, we only have a minute. Do you want to hear it? Elizabeth, go ahead. Is it the last one? It's just right here.
Oh, I'll just read it. Fool's Crow listened to the faraway rumble of Thunder Chief and felt his step become lighter. He felt it in his heart, in the rhythm of the drum, a peculiar sense of happiness, a happiness that sleeps with sadness. And the feeling made his head light, and he was removed from the others, dancing alone, singing a song that had to do with his life and this world. And in that other world he had visited in his vision. And then he saw the White Lodge and the pale blue light and the woman sitting across from him. And he knew she was there, someplace, watching him, watching the procession. And he saw her smile in the blue light, and he smiled. For even though he was, like Feather Woman, burdened with the knowledge of his people, their lives, and the lives of their children, he knew they would survive, for they were the chosen ones.
And as we wrap up, as Elizabeth said, the ki anitoyi imitax, the tale is complete. And at the end of the novel, the very last words of the book, their dark horns glistened, and they're talking about the bison. The dark horns glistened in the rain as they stood guard over the sleeping calves. The black horns had returned, and all around it was as it should be. And so the end of the book, and this is what Lois says. Lois says, what more could there possibly be to say at that moment? We know what else is coming. We've seen the elk hide. We've read the history books, a longer, grimmer story for another day. And so as we wanted to end on a happy note, that right now we're living in a time when we're bringing the bison back. So it's, in all of the sorrow and all of the devastation, we're bringing the bison back. And so there's two films, and I think we're out of time. Yeah. Great. And so these two films, one is Bring Them Home, that came out in 2024, is bringing back the genetic bison herd that had always been in our Blackfeet territory back to Chief Mountain, Ninistico, our most sacred site. And then Elizabeth, if you just last little quick, back to the PowerPoint. We also have the 10th anniversary of a Buffalo Treaty, one more, Elizabeth, which is signed by many Indigenous folks. Anyway, we wanted to leave on a sense of hope and thrivance, one more coup. And we also wanted to give you an opportunity to think back to what we hope is an opportunity to think about critical family, land-based learning, and speculative fiction. And last but not least, Elizabeth, keep going. We wanted to offer deep gratitude to you all, Kitsit, Samat, and one last, Elizabeth. If there's any questions or any final thoughts that you have for us, we would love to receive that. And hopefully we'll have an opportunity to come back and have a conversation after you've read Fool's Crow and engaged in this critical family history and speculative fiction opportunity. So thank you all so much for having us. Thank you, Tanya.
Yeah. Before we play the video, but feel free to continue participating. Kristen doesn't know this, but the Center for Education and Equity and Diversity, SEED, at Western Washington University is watching and live streaming in SEED right now. Hello, Longoria and Gray, and everyone else that we don't know, but we will soon. We also would like to invite you all to join us this evening from 6 to 7 if you're leaving and feeling like you want more. There is more. For our keynote address, How Indigenous Speculative Fiction Can Save Us, Stories of Thrivance from Survivors of an Apocalypse. For those joining remotely, that will be a different link, but if you're on our Mountie YouTube site, it will be under live events. And last but not least, we want to invite everyone to attend the 50th anniversary powwow, which is May 16th and 17th here on campus. And I just taught myself this so you can, I think it's right. Siksama si tuk. Should mean thank you in Blackfeet. I don't know. I also read there's a short, it's I. Is that right? Okay. Well, my internet may have failed me. It wasn't AI, but I tried. Thank you all for coming. We're going to play something in the background, and I hope you all have a wonderful day. Enjoying the weather.
This has been our home for millennia. For almost that entire time, we've lived with and alongside buffalo, who we call Inni. But almost a century ago, both of us were the targets of genocide, and Inni were killed off from more than 30 million down to less than 1,000. In the span of one generation, they disappeared from our lives. Without them, our world collapsed. But there were some of us who refused to give up, who held tight to the hope that with the return of Inni would come the healing from this trauma for the people. This is a story of survival, of resilience, hope, adventure, and determination. This is our story, the story of the Nitsitapi, Siksikaitsitapi, the Blackfoot people, who against enormous odds gave their lives and hearts to return Inni, to bring them home.
stories, millions of buffalo moved across North America. By 1890, the buffalo numbered less than 300.
We still have the songs, we have the ceremonies, but there's no buffalo to be seen. We need to bring that buffalo back.
Buffalo is our relative, the one we learn from, the one that cares for us.
The buffalo were our original teachers, and what happened in colonization is someone took this big cup and spread those teachings out, and we have to go around and pick them up.
It's an uphill job. We will need partners.
The nations, we all need to help each other.
Our goal is to put them on federal lands, national parks, reserves.
The vision was always that we would release them to be free roaming.
They should never be fenced, because when people coming out here and experience the animals themselves, that's pretty potent stuff.
It's just undescribable kind of things that happen with these buffalo. It's metaphysical, it's beyond our understanding. Buffalo restoration can be reconciliation.
When we reintroduce buffalo back into the environment, what happens is the revitalization of that ecosystem. Buffalo become climate change fighters.
It's such a big effort amongst a lot of different people working together to ensure that this will be their place for eternity.
The buffalo never left. It's us, humans, that have to come back to the relationship with the buffalo.